What's up, guys? This is Coach Donnie with ElevateYourself.org. Welcome to another episode of The Dig, where we talk about volleyball, training, and life, and dig deeper into the athlete. And today is, I know I say this all the time that we have a special guest, but it's very, very special because this is one of my favorite players of all time and my biggest source of inspiration for me, both on and off the court. We have REID PRIDDY. And I'm just going to list a few of his accolades. And if I go through all of them, it's going to go through the entire video. So we'll just start with some of the top ones. Four-time USA Olympian. Not many people can say that. Professional indoor and beach volleyball player. 2008 Olympic gold medalist. World League champion. Author, father, musician, food connoisseur, vlogger. And I'll include some of his old school vlogs below that you can watch and for your pleasure. Also, this is one of my favorite stats. He was the most efficient big hitter of the 2008 Olympics. I remember I don't know, Chris Marlowe, whoever was commentating that game, mentioned that. It just always stuck with me. And also founder of the Max Potential Mindset, which is an awesome program that helps you explore yourself to achieve your highest level of success. And it's helped me, and I'm still going through it, and it's helped me a lot so far. And Reid will talk about that more in this video if you're interested in checking that out too. So just to kind of break the ice, we'd like to start off with a quick set, which is 10 questions. And the goal is not to think and just the stream of consciousness response. All right? Ready to go?
Yep.
All right. Favorite food?
Mexican.
Favorite book?
Fearless.
Favorite movie?
Right now, The Greatest Showman.
Favorite song?
Typical by Mute Math.
Favorite non-volleyball activity?
Golf.
Favorite non-volleyball role model?
Kobe Bryant.
Rest in peace.
Yes.
Stuff block or bounce ball kill?
Stuff block.
Jump float or jump serve ace?
Jump serve.
Open net Bic or open net 4?
Open net Bic. Yeah.
Favorite shoe for volleyball?
So the Kobe 5, which we at Nike we took and made it into a volleyball shoe. So the shoe I wore in 2016 was an iteration of the Kobe 5.
You know what's funny about that is that's still one of the Nike Hypertext, right? The Zoom Air Nike Hypertext.
Yeah.
Were you involved in that process of?
I was.
Because I actually found out about that from following you and then watching you playing it, and then the USA guys got hooked on it. But that's still one of my favorite volleyball shoes of all time. And one of my partners, all volleyball, we always sell out on that because I still promote that hardcore. And I have like 5 pairs before they stop making them, just in case they stop making them. So
yes, good call.
Thanks so much for doing that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if you can just share with us your story about, where you grew up, how you got into volleyball, and kind of your journey to now.
Yeah. Well, good to be here, Donnie, by the way. So I started playing volleyball when I was 15 years old. It was in a PE class that I was first introduced to it in Florida. And I was encouraged by the PE teacher to try out for the school team. I was a freshman in high school. I was 5'4". So I was small, and I was a soccer player. And I decided to do it, just to go try out. And I ended up making the team, and I had a great experience. It was really fun. I think I was always a good athlete, but I was never on winning teams. And this particular experience was a JV team, and our claim to fame was we beat varsity in a scrimmage. But we went 11-0 in the conference. So I think the combination of like the newness of the sport, it was fun, and we were successful that first year, was sort of engaging. And we moved that year to Phoenix, my family, and we were nervous that now that I just fell in love with this new sport, that it wouldn't be offered in Phoenix, because it wasn't obviously everywhere back in whatever, the early 90s. So when we get to Phoenix, we ended up living in a city called Ahwatukee, and I went to a school called Mountain Point High School. And it just so happened that that year was the first year that boys volleyball was sanctioned as a sport, as a state sport, with a state championship. And I just so happened to go to the school with the best coach in Arizona, Fred Mann, who had some FIVB experience himself. He's a South African, and he's been there for the last 20 some years, winning state titles on the women's side now. But so I was very fortunate and extremely excited. I went to school, and that became my new passion. My parents, I still played soccer that year. I was on varsity as a sophomore, but I had a coach that made me hate it. And it was like that, plus I grew, and the ground in Arizona is like concrete. So like running on the I don't know, I just remember that soccer year just not enjoying it, and my body hurt like crazy because I grew so much, and it was like a lot of pounding. And so I started to pour myself into volleyball, and it was such a unknown, it was a outlier sport. In fact, my first juniors tournament was a collection of friends that went to the Boys Classic in January in Berkeley. And we had no coach. One of Sean Ross's father drove us there. It was actually it was a memorable year because that was the year that the California earthquake happened during that trip. But we called ourselves BYA, which meant Barnyard Animals. I mean, we just felt like we were outliers. And here we were, this group of guys that just like literally we would play all the time. We would play grass. We would play on carpet in Mormon churches. One of the guys had a key to a church, so we would play there. We would play in sand at different hotels had like sand courts. So, and then our high school ended up building a sand court. This was, in the mid 90s. So this was a long time ago. So at lunchtime at high school, we would be playing sand volleyball. So it became like a lifestyle almost, really, like right away. It was more than just a sport. But there was no clear pathway of how somebody from Arizona goes and plays beyond. So I was a setter in the back row, and I hit on the right side in the front row my entire high school career. We went on to win the state championship my junior year, and then we went undefeated my senior year and ended up losing in the finals, which was gut wrenching, but another valley to learn from. And I was recruited by USC to be a setter. And they'd come out twice to the house, met my parents, and offered me a scholarship. And so all signs were pointing for me going to USC as a setter. And right like 2 days before we actually like officially signed, they called, and Jim McLaughlin called my dad and said, we're going to pause for a second. There's a foreign kid that we're looking at, and we're waiting to see his SAT scores. And lo and behold, it comes out to be Donnie Sujo. And they ended up going with him. And so that left me out. And Jim McLaughlin's brother, Rick McLaughlin, was the coach at Loyola Marymount. Once he knew that I was available, because I was, wasn't like highly recruited I wasn't a blue chip guy by any means. I think I got a call from BYU, from UCSB. I think Stanford put a call in, but I don't think my grades were up to snuff. Although Stanford, my wife is telling me now that I should go take an assistant role at Stanford just to be around that school. But so Rick ends up reaching out, and I end up choosing to go to Loyola Marymount. And it was a beautiful campus. I remember setting foot on campus for the first time. It was absolutely gorgeous. I just wanted to play Division I in California near the beach. Those were sort of the criteria. So LMU fit the bill. But I don't know, 2-3 weeks into my career there, I was told that, hey, we've got a lot of setters, so you're not going to set. You're going to be a hitter. And so that was quite surprising. I had yet to pass up to that point, just kind of on the beach, but never at a Division I level. So all of a sudden, I had a giant weakness, which was passing. And that first year was a bit of a struggle to sort of be in this best league, NPSF, to be in a position that I wasn't necessarily comfortable in. I was a freshman already, and having to learn that new skill was a limiting factor. So I probably played 50% of the time my freshman year, and it was my passing that was the limiting factor. And I had a breakthrough my sophomore year. I really took that next summer was probably where I took the most personal ground in college, where it was just like, okay, now that I've seen this, I've kind of come up short. What's in my control to get better, to get stronger, so I ended up taking lifting seriously and trained a couple times, on my own throughout the summer, rallied some people in Arizona to do so, and then came back in. And that was my first All-American year. It was my sophomore year. And then, went on, and by my senior year, I was we kind of created a new position. I was a passing opposite. So we kind of had 6 outside hitters. We were all sort of the same player on my team, but we went on to we were 6th in the nation. We went on to beat the #1 Long Beach State in the first round of playoffs in an epic 5-set match. It was like 3 hours long. It was crazy. And then after that, I went out to the national team. And at that time, I had no true appreciation of what the national team had in store. I was only sort of exposed to the AVP on Sundays on NBC, and I would record it and watch it. So in my mind, I was probably going to live in Southern California, get married, have a family, and just play on the tour. But as soon as I graduated, I was invited out to try out to see if I could make the 2000 Olympic team. And it was during that time that I started to recognize and understand just being around the guys. They were adults. They were, men with families and making money, and playing overseas and talking about buying houses and investments and all this stuff. And it was all just sort of just like, whoa, this is a big step up from, playing volleyball and trying to side out. Like this is big boy stuff. So I ended up seeing all the excitement and build up to the Olympic Games. And I ended up being an alternate. So I wasn't chosen to make the team. But I had seen enough to recognize that, like, man, whatever these guys did to be on the right side of this roster, this is now my next focus. This is worth it. So after the Olympic Games, so it was hard to watch. It was probably one of the most formative moments from a kind of a devastating moment that was catalytic to kind of reshaping my future trajectory. I was headed one way, and after this loss, it was like, nope, I'm going to go this direction. 2 months later, I get a call from Ryan Millar and George Romain. Those were guys were playing in Italy, and they said, hey, our team needs an outside hitter. We just had a guy blow out his shoulder. Like, would you come out and try out? And at that time, I was really kind of directionless. So I flew out for a 3-day tryout, played as hard as I could, and they ended up offering me a contract. And at that point, I had a van that was given to me for free that I drove around, a caravan. I was in debt from school. I had things were very different. And after 3 days, they offered me my first contract, which was 55,000 euro, which to me might as well have been hitting the lottery. I mean, it was hitting the lottery.
Yeah.
And sort of that just kind of all of a sudden I was on the worst team, but I was in the best league in the world. At that time, all the Russians, all the Brazilians, everybody was in Italy, the Serbians. And so these were just like super teams. And my mind just got completely open to this new world of international professional volleyball. And from that point on, this was now, this is what I did. And every Olympic Games that I went to, I would peer over the fence of the beach, kind of like, is now the time to go back? Because I always wanted to do that. But meanwhile, the business of international indoor volleyball just kept going up and up and up. New markets were opening up, China, Turkey, and then Russia. So I was very, very fortunate to play during a time that, you know, every time a new market would open up, they would overpay and set new barriers to try to get better players. So I went to Korea and Russia for 5 years, Turkey for a year, and it was just an amazing time to be an indoor professional. And so I did that for 16 years, and then after Rio, transitioned to beach volleyball and had a meeting with myself and my family, basically saying like, hey, you know, I'm used to making 4-year increments and goals now. I'm not in this just for the next tournament. Like, what's the big goal? And do I have it in me to try to go for another Olympic Games, but on the beach? It's a tall order, but, you know, I learned early on in my career that part of the process of becoming the best version of yourself, to really extract the potential that's in you, you have to have something on the wall that says, this is where I'm going, and you have to reference it every day. And so, you know, much to the, you know, I offended a lot of people, I think, by just saying like, hey, I'm going for the Olympics. And that, I think people thought that I was somehow behaving with an entitled mindset, when really I was just putting it on the wall for myself. This is the target I'm going for. I'm putting myself on the line here, making myself vulnerable, because the likelihood of me reaching this goal is pretty small. But that was the target, and I started at the very bottom, unranked. Year one, I think I was 980 from a Norseca, you know, 25th place, and then I went all the way to 30th in the world, and ended up winning the Manhattan Beach Open last year with Trevor Crabb, and then have teamed up recently this last off season with Dave Lee, who was a great teammate of mine for over a decade on the indoor court. And we've been making this journey together over the last several months, and it's been the best that I've been playing. And then COVID hit, kind of shut everything down. But that's kind of, you know, the 5-minute version of what 20 years in the sport professionally looks like.
Man, what an awesome story. I've read tidbits here and there, especially from your ebook, but to get it directly from you and to add additional insights that you provided was really great. I knew you were recruited as a setter, because what's funny is every time you've had to set out a system, you've always had really good form. Like, you'll jump up, square up to your target, and just have a quick release, whereas everyone's like deep dishing it or just completely spinning it. So it makes a lot of sense. And when I found out that you were finally teaming up with David Lee, because I was DMing him and saying like, when are you and Reed gonna finally come together, bring back that '08 chemistry? So that was great. And yeah, it's unfortunate that the quarantine hit, because you guys were making a lot of great strides, and it's not to any surprise, because he's got some deep dish hands too.
That's right.
So along your professional career, you've played in 6 countries?
That sounds right. Yeah. Like, lived in 6 countries. Yeah.
Which one was your favorite league to play in?
That's a good question. So Italy has the deepest history. I mean, they have teams that have been around for 60 plus years, which means you have multiple generations of fans. And so it's a pretty unique situation. It's the closest thing that comes to, I think, what playing in the US might be like, in the sense that as a pro, you're just completely exposed. My first year pro, my mom was visiting, and we went to the bank to withdraw some money. And, you know, the 65-year-old banker woman was talking to me in Italian, and we leave the bank, and my mom says like, "Oh, that's so cool, like she recognized you." And I was like, no, she was talking a ton of smack to me right there, because we lost the night before. So there's good with bad. It's fun. It's really engaging when what you're doing has a broader impact to, you feel like you're a part of the city. And so I would say Italy has the deepest roots, but it can also get really annoying for that reason. Everybody's an expert, and I would imagine that's how it feels to play in the US, you know what I mean? With, thinking about Tiger Woods and Michael Jordan. I mean, this last documentary, looking at what he had to endure, the benefits, there's also comes with some costs. But for me, playing in Russia was probably the most engaging because they actually, we were flying in private jets. They were building teams with budgets, and Champions League is probably the most fun tournament as a professional to be in. And it can be very taxing when you're flying commercially. So just by flying privately, we saved like 2.5 days a week. So we were able to be in, different countries and playing in all of these big time matches, match after match after match. And obviously, the money in Russia was significant. So it felt like you were playing for the Yankees. And that was a great feeling. I'd been on those types of teams, and I've been on the teams that were like strung together with promised money that never came through. So I've kind of seen what it does to the individual and the team, that it feels when you're in a professional environment, you're treated like a pro. It helps, it helps the entire system. So, and then I would say Turkey. After Russia, I went to Turkey. That was when I had just our son at that time. So my wife and son, our family would always travel together. Turkey was a really fun place to be. Great people. You aren't playing, like every match is not stimulating like it was in Russia. Like every match you had to bring it. And Turkey, you would have some matches that the level was, you had some really good teams and then some not so good teams. So I would much rather play in areas where you're always being tested. But from a lifestyle standpoint, it was a beautiful area. It's become a little bit dangerous, I think, but the people there were amazing. The food was delicious. And so each place had a different vibe. But I would say those are the top 3 places.
Man, I remember following you. You played for Zenit, right? Zenit Kazan?
Yes. Uh-huh.
Yeah. And that was before when you got in, when Max Holt broke your nose. Was it during the season when you broke your nose or your cheekbone?
Yeah, I played with Novosibirsk for 3 years, and then I played with Kazan for 1, broke my face, and then came back and played for him for a second year.
Yeah, I remember that. And was that when Lloy Ball was still on the team?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, that was some fun volleyball. It was hard to scour to YouTube to try to find some footage of you guys, but always some obscure Russian YouTube channel that would post games that I was happy to watch you guys play. And then I remember when you came back from your knee injury and you got offered the contract in Italy for Simone Perotti. And just to show the scope of how much people valued your volleyball career and just the volleyball presence in Italy, I remember when you first got subbed into the court, the fans were applauding. This is like your first time, and the captions were saying how this is like your first moment on the court, and they're talking about REID PRIDDY, but just to have that happen in the game of volleyball is just awesome, and the amount of support that you talked about. So you played for a couple of teams. Out of all the teams you played for, who was your favorite setter to play with?
I would say I played for a lot of great setters. I would say that Micah, I think Micah and Lloy, and I think Micah towards the end there was really fun to play with. He was a competitor. He was a team guy. And like hyper competitive, as is Lloy. So I think with either of those guys, you can't go wrong.
Yeah.
I think the dynamic of the team in 2016 was a fun team to be a part of.
Mm-hmm.
And then Micah, I was able to play with him on that Italian team, which was really fun. I'm trying to think of some other setters I played with.
Don Sujo.
Yeah, Don Sujo. So what's interesting about Donnie is that when we played together, I was his first choice.
Yeah.
So my numbers were, and his he could set the so in terms of like my performance, I hit the best off of Donnie just because he was setting me up like crazy. So all the best balls, the Bic, the go. I think I was averaging over 600 with the most kills in World League. So not only was my efficiency high, but I was also the leading point scorer, but we were losing. So that was the transition for me as a player, where I started to recognize that, like, hey, Clay has this guy is has so much potential, and how do we get other people going here? Like, it's great to have great personal stats, but I want to win. So I think that's when the transition and the realization started happening of just like, okay, I kind of rose to this point of feeling great about my game, but what good is it if you're not winning? How do we get the team involved? But yeah, Donnie was an amazing, quick tempoed, very fast hands. I always struggled with guys who held the ball. And setters would always get frustrated with me, and they thought that it was being picky, but this is what happens. We're going to get into some minutia here. So when I am approaching, I'm not thinking about, like, I've somehow calculated your release timing, and my body has subconsciously figured out how to be on time. And that's really important for a player like me because I'm undersized. So I need to be moving everything into the ball at the apex of my spot. Like, I cannot be early and under the ball. And any time that you change as a setter that timing, I will naturally, but not know it, take a break step instead of an acceleration step on my third step. And that completely changes the momentum. And you notice it the most on the Bics. So I was never over so much when I played with Micah, because Micah was so aware of the block and the quick that every once in a while he would kind of like hold it for a second to get that guy to bite and then flick it to the Bic. But that would always cause me to subconsciously have a break step. So a break step meaning I have to now extend further, and I was over more on the Bic. But and so I think if I had a preference, it was just it was always the quicker hands. So yeah,
that makes sense, because you're a fast, just a style is very fast outside hitter. I wonder if that comes from your soccer background of just getting quick to the ball. I remember watching you guys in 2005. This is before Sujo's injury, and watching you guys compete in the World League. And there's moments like in rotation 5, for example, where you're passing in that 5-6 seam, kind of shading right. And I'm like, there's no way Don's going to set him. That's just a crazy inside-out approach.
Yeah.
And then not only does he set you, right, he doesn't compensate for a longer distance. He just gets you fast. He just jacks it out there. And you're still hitting that flare, and you have to land in all these awkward positions because he's still setting a tempo from wherever you are, which was really great to see your athleticism.
Yeah, those are fun. Those are fun plays. It's just like football. You're just trying to run routes that, I think the setter's just trying to get the defense off. And a lot of times recognizing that the times that you are least likely to get set are probably the times that you should get set.
Very true. Do you think if he didn't get injured, would he have been the setter for you guys leading up to the 08 Olympics? Because I know Hugh McCutcheon gave Lloy Ball a call after that injury, right?
I have no idea. You know, I guess I don't know all that was wrapped up into that decision, but I do know that I think Lloy was one of the best setters in the world for a long time. And even in 2012, I personally wish he would have came back. Not to any disrespect to Donnie at all, but Lloyd was still playing in one of the best in the world.
Yeah.
And so, you know, a lot of the setting position is, I guess every position, it's one part tactic and execution, and another part chemistry.
Yeah.
So I think that Lloyd did a good job of, you know, for all those years, he's won so many championships overseas, and had a lot of experience, was still playing at the highest level. It wasn't like he was going down. He just, from what I understood, playing on the national team meant that his team would continue to have to like kind of migrate west, where he was from the East Coast. So yeah, I'm not sure. I'm sure the injury set Donnie back as it does, but it also makes people stronger. And he was able to go from 04 to 2012 as the setter, which was cool to see.
Yeah, I love watching Lloyd. I play in the USA Nationals every year, and the highlight is to be able to watch him play in the 40s and 50s. Unfortunately, he doesn't play. I always hope he's going to come back and play with Pineapple in the Open again. But every time there's just not many volleyball fans in USA in general. So whenever I bring a new person to USA and I tell them, like, dude, you got to watch Lloyd. And I can show them highlight videos, but when they see him that first release, it's just so smooth, no spin. And most people think you have to set lightning fast to all your hitters, and he can set tempo. But why is it that even if there's a little bit of a height to it, his hitters are still one-on-one, they're in complete rhythm, and he makes it look easy. And he's just, he's amazing to watch. Even now, he could probably compete at that level.
Yeah, that's what made him. And I think when you compare Lloyd and Donald, I think that's what the connection that Lloyd had with Clay was the determining factor. I mean, you saw when Clay found rhythm, it was devastating to the rest of the world. And his set was always a little higher. So I think it was hard for other players to have everything tempo in front of them and to have almost like a second tempo behind them, you know. And obviously Lloyd was able to set each guy what they needed. Even so far as setting different middles at different timings, you know?
Yeah.
So.
Well, and to add to that, to the backside set, you were probably hitting like an 80% clip from rotation one as the OH1, right? I feel like every time he set you, I don't know how the teams didn't key in on that, because I feel like Lloyd always sets you in rotation one. And then it was always one-on-one, or even if it was two up, you were always very terminal from there. So even that was a really different tempo, super flat and fast compared to Clay's loopy one.
Right. Yeah, that was a tough rotation for us. I think I'm better on the left and Clay's better on the right, but every once in a while we would get stuck where I was never, during that era, what's so crazy is that after my knee injury is when I became a great high ball hitter. And it took me learning how to use the hands. But back in those days, I wasn't a great high ball hitter. And so if the pass got off the net, that's when we would get in trouble, because it would just be Clay hitting high balls outside. So that, you know, row one is a tricky rotation for every team, it seems.
Yeah, I don't know if you've seen the USA Women's, how they've tried to deal with that is like super stack on the left, have the opposite and the middle run slides, and then just have the outside, or Jordan Larson just swing all the way, pass from the middle. Yeah. I remember, I forgot who was commentating too during that rise in 08 of where talking about the development of Clay Stanley and his ability to hit on the left side was a key component too. So not only the connection that Lloyd and Clay brought from the professional leagues, but his ability just to hit left side gave just a little bit extra power.
Right. This is one of the things where I think too a lot of setters miss, and even hitters. So Clay was better the further off the net he got.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the same way. So when I get off the net, I have freedom to be a broad jumper. I have more range. Like if you can think about, let's see, the camera's here. Like if a ball is here, like your range is limited.
Mm-hmm.
But as you move it, now I could pass this way and this way. And I think once they dialed in that set that gave him the right amount of space, which was a different set than everybody else, which makes it tough for a setter, right? To have these unique setting points. It's not just like, oh, let me groove in a hut or a left side high ball. It's, oh, who am I setting? Reed. Oh, Sean Rooney, or whoever it might be. It might just be a little bit different, but all the setters we had were good enough to be able to make those changes.
Yeah. And another fun interview from Lloy, they're asking him, what's your strategy? It's like, the middle's just the easiest place to get a kill. And then people thought, well, your middles are only 6'7", maybe 6'9" with Tom Hoff. But he's like, well, you get a one-on-one, it's like, why not set them? It's just an easy set to make. I mean, it's easier said than done because he made it look easy. But he was still running them. I feel like he brought the perfect system for you guys, right? Running middles 10 feet off the net, really starting that trend. But you guys had super athletic middles that hung in the air, were very open to the setter. So you had that big window to set at. Whereas most middles, they're square to the net. They have a 2-motion arm swing, just all elbow and snap, and they're close to the setter. So it has to be perfect. So to see efficient 6'7" middles being the best in the world was really great to see too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the stat. So golf has a stat that is called proximity to the hole, and they measure everything based off of that. So they understand probabilities based on how far the golf ball is from the hole, and the average number of strokes it would take to get in the hole. And so in volleyball, the real leading metric is, where is the setter setting from? And so in a perfect pass situation, most every team is around 70% indoors, 73% maybe the efficiency of side out. So that means that if I'm just going to lob a ball to one of the top teams in the world, it's probably going to be higher than that number for one of the top teams in the world, like a medal winning team, then, I've got less than a 25% chance of scoring. So my goal as a defender is to try to get the ball off the net. So setters like Lloy, the best setters, are able to keep their team, in perfect pass situations when it's not a perfect pass. And that's really, if you're a setter and you want to recognize like what is, Bruno for Brazil right now, I would say he has worked with like Lucas for so long that they're running plays at 12 to 13 feet. Now, if you imagine, let's say a guy like Clay Stanley goes back to serve against a Brazil. Typically, what you're thinking about is, you're not thinking about a perfect pass. You're trying to make sure that ball is not an overpass and not an ace. Those are the two things that you don't want. You just want the ball high. We call it 20-10, 20 feet off, 20 feet in the air, 10 feet off the net. And imagine what makes a great setter is to be able to take that 20-10 and make it feel like it's a perfect pass right on the net. That's how setters, I think, differentiate themselves, is by being able to keep their team in rhythm. And Lloy was amazing at that. The other thing about Lloy is that he's so tall and can jump that overpasses become perfect passes. So I got really accustomed to passing really high and tight, and would go and play with a setter that didn't have those gifts. And it was like overpass after overpass after overpass. Yeah. So, imagine Lloyd being able to take overpasses and balls at 15 feet, and they all still keep all 4 hitters in play. Maybe the Bic gets compromised. That was kind of a new set for us. But all in all, that's how setters can really set themselves apart from the rest of the world.
Yeah. Speaking of Brazil and USA, when you guys were in that 2008 gold medal match and you guys lost that first set, what was spoken in the huddles, and like what was the strategy that led you guys to come back and then to put Brazil in such a awkward position to change their lineup so much and then for you guys to eventually win?
I think at that point, that team was so dialed that there wasn't emotional ups and downs anymore based on the score. So knowing what we had gone through the previous 4 days, which was a 15-13 win against Serbia, or 16-14 in the fifth set in the quarterfinal, which is the most pressure-packed match of the entire Olympics. And then we go to the semifinals and beat Russia 3-2, 15-13 or 15-12, whatever it was. I think losing the first set of a gold medal match, like it doesn't I don't think it was phasing at all. And we had battled, they were our big brother, right? So for the entire quad, any sort of mental training, any sort of visualization was us versus them. So I think there was an expectation that this was not going to be easy. And one of the things that we did that really, with Brazil, that opened up our minds to appreciate the skills of other teams, was they did so many things that were phenomenal, that were just nobody else could do. And especially when they had Ricardinho as a setter. I mean, like, they were just playing a different game than everybody else. And for whatever reason, I think from our coaching staff's encouragement, we became collectively okay with letting go of their spectacular plays. So it almost never even fazed us when Dante would come in for an X1 and just bounce it with no block up. I think previously we probably would have been like, whoa, they're just doing whatever they want to do. We collectively literally would just not even let it hit our psyche and just say, well, that's what Brazil does. Brazil does those amazing things, and we're still in this. So I think the other thing I would mention sort of behind the scenes was when Hugh's family was attacked in the early parts of the Olympic Games. He was absent from us for 3-4 games. That was the quietest timeouts we've ever had. And I think that was like the last moment. It was almost like the last part of growth that our team needed was to feel like we could handle it. Like we've been trained well enough to be able to handle it. And so by the time we're back in the medal matches, there were certain timeouts where nothing was said at all. Where it was just like, hey, water up. All the right dialogues taking place on the court. If a coach had something to say specifically to a player or, to the group, but there was no panic. And in fact, when they made that switch in the fourth set, I remember thinking like, oh man, we're absolutely going to win. Like this is like, this can't work for them. But then again, that's probably a naive statement, because Russia did it in 2012, put Muserski at the opposite. And it was the very thing that changed the entire dynamic of that match. So, but yeah, those were some of the things that were going on behind the scenes.
Man, awesome insight. I didn't realize that so much was unsaid leading up to those moments. Because one of my favorite things to watch, especially as a coach, is when the camera crew goes in the timeouts. And even if I don't understand the language, like it's Bulgarian or Russian or Italian, you just read so much into the body language cues and also the player's reaction, right? Are people kind of twiddling their thumbs on the side, or is everyone zoned in? And there's a few key timeouts I remember from Hugh. And I remember following you guys from 2005 all the way to 2008. And I hope somebody does a case study on this team as their thesis, because it's one of the most incredible transformations. A team on paper that would not have been prized to win gold medal leading up, but quietly crept up. And you see the evolution of the playing style, the evolution of the system, which was pretty new at the time, right? A perfect pass 10 feet off the net, a system and a group of guys that were atypical. You had medium-sized middles. For you guys, I guess you were the L1 But then at any time, Riley would be able to hit a junk ball, like a Clay Stanley ball, and just turn. Like I remember in World Cup, someone makes a crazy play, deep area one off the court. Lloy sets a go from the bench, and Riley just crushes it down the line as if it's perfect set, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then he sticks his tongue out and talks trash. And that was just like every day for you guys. But to see that from day one of 2005, and I remember in 2007 was one of the hardest World Cups to watch. I think it was 2007, the one where
Mm-hmm.
you guys had a really good shot to win it.
Yes.
And I mean, Russia was just playing out of the minds. But I remember the match against Tunisia or Puerto Rico, one of the key losses, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I remember Hugh, in just a moment of frustration at a timeout, he's just saying, serve it in, hit it in, let's go, guys. Like the first time I really seen him heated to just yell at you guys. And then to see that evolve into just quiet, you guys got this. We've worked for this. You guys, you guys swept Brazil in 3 in the World Cup, and you guys didn't look surprised. It wasn't a celebration that was elated. It was just a business win, shake hands, move on. And then you guys beat them again in the World League, and yeah, just to see the evolution was really awesome.